Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10 over here on Clueless Gamers. I'm your host, Pete, joined in a second, as always, by my co host, Brian. Guys, we're back. If you're watching this, it's that time of the season, year 5. Can't believe it. I was just talking to Brian about that for this podcast, and the NFL season is right upon us for the 2024 NFL season. Kicks off September 5th, Ravens, Chiefs. So, about a week and a half or so from this time of this recording. We're excited to be back. This, of course, is the prediction show. So we're going to talk about some off-season storylines while we're doing the predictions. Of course, since the last time you saw us, free agency, the draft, mini camp, training camp's going on right now, along with really actually the preseason is going on. Training camp is over. All of that has been going on, and there's so many storylines and things to talk about. We're going to talk about all of that while we pick all the division winners. We'll do some playoff predictions, and we'll do a Super Bowl prediction. We like to do it here right at the end of August, lock in our picks, and then see how right or wrong we are. We were just talking about last season's predictions, and man, there was some ones that were really, really bad in there, but we did get a few as well. So with all that, Brian, I welcome you in, man. How the hell are you doing? Welcome back. First and 10, we're back, man.
We are back. It is great to be back. I haven't seen you in quite a
I know
while,
it's been a
so
bit.
it's good to be back in your company here as we get ready for another season. Always love doing the show here and feel like each year we get better, more comfortable at doing it. We start getting more interaction from our viewers, so it really has just been a great project, I guess, that we've started and have continued and really looking forward to another season here to come.
Yeah, it's our great little side hustle, our side business that we have. But I feel the same way. I feel like we've been upgrading with equipment, with the quality that hopefully we're bringing it to you each and every season. I remember it was only like 2, 3 seasons ago. I didn't even have this set up by me. We didn't even have official really mics. We were using webcam mics. We were audio only one season because I didn't. My whole room
Right.
was under construction here, and I had nowhere to record it. So I think we've made long strides on how this podcast is produced, and hopefully you guys not even appreciate it, but it is a better viewing experience for you guys, and you're enjoying it out there because we always welcome feedback and comments. We love talking football, man, all the time, 24/7, 365. So, Bry, this is where this is a special podcast we do every year, and I love doing this podcast because our feet are held to the fire, right? We make picks every single week. All of that is a bunch of fun, but picking your division winners, picking your playoff rankings and who's going to progress in the playoffs, and then your Super Bowl participants. This is big stuff right here, and we have a lot to talk about. So I'm ready. Are you ready?
More than ready. Let's fire it up.
And we're doing this. We talked about it a little bit, but we don't know each other's predictions. We have no idea. We have not discussed that beforehand, and we're kind of doing this live. We've thought about it off stream, but we're locking in the picks written on the paper here right next to me in this one. So let's start off and kick it off, man. AFC East, home are your Jets. A lot been
Oh.
talking about then. We're going to pick 1 through 4 here. Do you want to go back and forth, or do you want me to run through the 4 and you to run for the 4? What do you want to do, man?
Well, for this one, I'll let you go first. You can take your 1 through 4.
Sounds excellent. So, Bry, I'm locking it in. I'm putting my picks in here. Having the AFC East 1, I believe, might sound a little predictable, a little boring. I believe the Buffalo Bills are going to win this one. I think they have lost a lot of pieces in the offseason, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Stephon Diggs got traded. I understand all that. But I think in that instance, it could be a little bit of addition by subtraction with the kind of issues that we saw even going into last season between Diggs and Josh Allen. And I think this offense has a chance to really play balanced football. We saw that really at the back end of last season where it was very more balanced. Allen's numbers came a little bit down statistically, but they were winning. He was running the ball more. It felt like a better cohesive team of how they were approaching each and every game offensively. And I think they're going to be able to handle some of the changes defensively. And when you have the best quarterback in the division, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, I kind of have you win in the division. Now, this one is a controversial one because I've gone, I wouldn't even say controversial. I'd say difficult one. I've gone back and forth about who I thought would be in second place because I'm between the Dolphins or the Jets because It's a tough pick. I feel like the Dolphins have lost some pieces. I think they've lost some momentum. I'm not the biggest believer in Tua. And with the Jets, like I want to believe in them. I like some of the additions they've made. I like that Rodgers is hopefully coming back. But then all this Hassan Reddick stuff has gone on. It looks like he's not going
Yeah.
to end up playing. He's asked for another trade after he was traded from the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, Bryce Huff, your leading sack leader last year, went over to the Eagles. I've gone back and forth in this, but I'm going to lock in the Dolphins at number 2. And I hate to do that. And I know some of our Jets viewers are going to hate me there. But I just trust the coach more. I trust, believe it or not, even for everything that I think Tua is, he's still a statistic kind of stat machine. And I'm really concerned about how Rodgers is going to look coming off this Achilles injury. He's been very open talking about this camp has been significantly difficult more than it was last year. All those things kind of concern me. So I'm putting the Dolphins in second, and then, of course, the Jets third, and the Pats a distant fourth place. I think they might be the worst team in the NFL. Bry, your AFC picks, man. I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, so we're in agreement on two spots, and then we've got two flip-flopped. Now, as much as you know, I root for the Jets. When I come on here, I give, what I feel. I'm not giving my picks in a biased manner.
Cogent
And so
analysis.
this is how I see it. AFC East, I'm starting with the division winner, and our good friend Dylan might have to mute the sound here. Well, then again, he'd have to mute it regardless of who I said if it wasn't the Jets. But
Probably.
I'm going with the Miami Dolphins to
Really?
win
Wow.
this division. I
Okay.
I am a believer
A
in
believer.
Tua. I know we've seen kind of some highs and lows from him, but the highs have been pretty high. The lows in part down the stretch last season. You think of that playoff game they're playing in -20
Yeah, one of the
conditions.
coldest
That
games
was
ever.
not exactly just not conducive of, playing well in that kind of environment. I just think this offense is too explosive. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle are locked in for long-term deals here. They got a great 1-2 punch in the backfield with Achan and Mostert. I think again this team's going to be able to pile up points. It becomes a matter of how they do it against stiffer competition, which
Yeah,
last
that's the
season
question.
it wasn't as good. Yeah, so that is a legitimate question, but I just feel like Mike McDaniel, as quirky as he may be, the guy can coach offense. He has a quarterback he believes in. They've paid him like they believe in him, and I just think it's going to be a big year for Tua and company, and the Dolphins finally get over the hump and have a big season this year and take this division.
I'm not gonna lie to you,
Second
Bry.
place.
I did not see that one coming.
Well, as we go along further here, there's one division in particular where I went a bit out on a limb, so we'll get to that at some point. But finishing at the AFC East in second, I'm going with the Buffalo Bills, and
Okay.
again, Dylan is going to keep it
He's
muted. He
crying right
doesn't want to
now.
hear what I have to say. But apologies to Dylan. The Bills,
Sorry, bro.
I do have some concerns, losing Diggs, as you mentioned. The weapons, like, I think they're serviceable. I don't think there's really a
Yeah.
go-to wide receiver there. We like Shakir. He kind of came into his own a bit last year. Certainly the tight end, Dalton Kincaid, looks like he's going to be a real star. And the running game really came to the fore last year with James Cook, so they did some good things. Josh Allen, though, as good and as talented as he is, he still has a lot to prove as far as cutting down the
That's fair.
turnovers and some of the negative plays. But I still think this is a good football team, top to bottom. I think it's a team that's going to make the playoffs, and I think we're going to see a good version of the Bills. Just a peg down for me a little bit just because Diggs was that guy in the offense. He was Allen's guy. Sometimes they kind of did force feed him, so maybe the
Hmm.
offense will be a little more balanced, going to a different array of weapons. But I still think the Bills are going to be in pretty good shape. I
Okay.
got them in second place. Now to third, we get to the Jets, and I just feel like going into the season, there's just too many question marks for me to be like
Yeah.
slam dunk. This is going to be the year. As much as I want to say to win the division, break the playoff drought, do some damage in the playoffs. I love Aaron Rodgers. I wanted him to be a Jet, but the reality is this isn't 30-year-old Aaron Rodgers in his prime. This is 41-year-old Rodgers coming off a major injury after playing only 4 plays last season. It is a major question mark how well he's going to play. Now, I certainly think he could be serviceable, but the health is a huge question. And let's be honest, the play dropped off a bit his last year in Green Bay. He was not the Rodgers that we came to know and love that last season. So I still think it is a big question just how good he's going to be. And the offensive line, some questions too. They did address it, but there's some injury questions there. The roster is definitely talented, but the coaching staff leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
They've got a lot to prove. And I just need to, if I need to see Rodgers be on the field, healthy, looking like more of the old prime Rodgers, then I would feel very comfortable. But how can I feel comfortable when we haven't seen him? He refuses to play in the preseason. Even if you just gave him a little bit of a tune-up, I would just want to see him on the field. So I just think there's too many questions. Look, the defense is exceptionally talented. The roster has plenty of talent, but again, I just feel like it's a case where we're looking at the team on paper and we say, look at all these stars and the potential that they have. And when the games come, it just doesn't seem like the results are going to be there as much. So with that said, I think they're going to be, around 9-8. I don't think it's going to be
That's
a
exactly
total
where I have
bust,
them.
but I'm just not buying them as a 12-win team like some people are saying, or 13 wins, and that this is the year they can make this Super Bowl run. Got a long way to go before I'm there, so that's kind of my take. But then, and then look, we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on the last place team. We agree it's the Patriots.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some things that say maybe they're improved here with Gerard Mayo, running the defense. It's going to be weird watching a Patriots team that's
So
not
weird.
coached by Bill Belichick.
So weird.
It also sounds like Jacoby Brissett might have the leg up on the QB competition there. Drake May, maybe later on down the line. But we know what the Patriots are. There's not a lot there on offense, not a lot of weapons. They'll rely on the running game, the defense to be scrappy. They'll scratch across the win here and there, but this team's just lacking on talent, and it's going to be a long way before they're competitive.
Yeah, I appreciate your cogent analysis there with the Jets. I for a long time this offseason, I had them in second place. I thought they were somewhere around about 10 wins. I think they're going to be more around that 8-9, 9-8. I just I really had a lot of hope in the Reddick part of it. I thought Rodgers would be a little bit more involved, kind of like what he was last offseason. I think Nathaniel Hackett should not be an offensive coordinator. I think he might be the worst offensive coordinator in the league, and I'm not sold on Saleh yet. So there's been not a lot of great things that I've loved coming out of the Jets camp, and I just had to be honest and put the Dolphins in there, and I appreciate that being for you. That being said, not that we're spending any time on it more than just this, but I did like the little things I did see out of Drake May in the preseason. He has a little bit of juice to him. It's just the team around him is just atrocious. Brian, let's go to the AFC South. This is one that we both were very wrong with, as many people were last season. No one kind of saw the meteoric rise of the Texans last season. But for me, I think right off the bat, I am buying the Kool-Aid. I am drinking the Kool-Aid. I am taking the Houston Texans. I did say, even though I had them, I think, in third place last year, I did say that I loved what D'Amico Ryans was bringing, the energy, the ideas that they had there, the free agents that they signed. I've loved their offseason yet again. I think it was a great offseason. I think the way they've handled everything in Houston has just been top to bottom, a class organization. And I think, I don't know how far they can go in the playoffs. Maybe it's going to be kind of, again, the divisional round. But I think this team is only growing and going to get better. And they've surrounded Stroud with the perfect pieces that he hopefully will not have a sophomore slump. So I'm giving the Texans the nod there. I am still buying the Jags. Okay, I think there is something still
Going
there
back to that well.
I do. I think there is something still there in Trevor Lawrence. I bought into him a lot last season. They burned me. I'm buying one more time. For better or for worse, I think I like the pieces they've added. They bring in Gabe Davis. They bring in Brian Thomas from LSU. I like what they've added on offense. I think there is something there because let's let's call it what it is. They have a really bad year. We're not going to always start asking some questions about the quarterback play. They just gave Lawrence a huge contract extension. So even if he has some questions, they're going to be getting rid of Doug Peterson. So this is a big, big year for the Jags. They got to deliver. I think the third one is pretty obvious. I'm going the Colts and then Titans. I actually think both of these teams are going to be feisty. I do believe that. I think the Colts can actually have a shot of maybe whispers of playoffs come the end of the last month of the season. It all depends on what? Anthony Richardson's health. In the 50, 60 snaps we saw of him, he was very impressive, but he got hurt in basically every single game. So he hopefully has changed his style. I believe a lot in Shane Steichen as the head coach and the offensive coordinator. I think there is a lot to be to like and appreciate about what he does in building a team and coaching it. And I like some of the pieces they have here, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And I watched Richardson for a couple of years in Florida. I'm a big Gators fan. There are flaws with him for sure, but the upside of it I think is there, and I think they could be a little bit of a feisty team, just maybe not making the playoffs, just be on the outside looking in. And the Titans, look, they spent a ton of money this offseason. They think they're going to be good, right? They bring in Snead from the Chiefs. There's a lot of hype around Levis. They believe a lot in what they have there, and I think they might be somewhere in that 5 to 6 win category, but I think they're going to kind of be a little feisty. And I think there will be a thing where it's like, hey, you look up, they won 5 games this season, but damn, like, they weren't getting blown out. They like gave some teams some pressure down the stretch there in the second half and the fourth quarter. I really do like what they're going to kind of build there. Now, head coach, GM, all new in Tennessee, huge question mark. We'll have to see how that plays out, but we'll see if Will Levis is the guy this season. Bri, what say you?
Yeah, on Tennessee, that was kind of the way they played under Mike Vrabel. Even if they were never one of the more talented teams, they were always grinding, rarely would get blown out. So I agree there could be some promise there. But starting at the top, I am in agreement with the Houston Texans, and I'll say that with the caveat that I feel like this team is going to take a step back rather than a step
Okay,
forward.
that's fair.
I just don't feel overly good about any of the other 3 teams in this division that I think they kind of win it by default. And we know how talented they are and how much more talented they are now with Diggs a part of the offense and guys like Daniil Hunter coming over on the defense. Everyone's in love with CJ Stroud, as we know. I think there could be a little bit of a sophomore slump.
Okay,
That is something that I kind of believe in. Defenses figure out a way, figure out your
that's
strengths
true.
and weaknesses and adjust accordingly. So I almost feel like their off season has been a little bit fantasy football like, right? Like adding Joe Mixon in the backfield. They got like these 3 good receivers. It all looks really good on paper, but again, there's going to be a lot of hype. There's a lot of
A lot
trends
of
with this
pressure.
team, and sometimes there's kind of expectations teams fall short. Now, I have them winning the division, but I think it could be a little harder because this time, the bullseye is going to be on their back when teams play them. They're not going to sneak up on anybody this
First
year.
place
So
schedule as well.
I'm taking right. So I'm believing in the talent and the quarterback to a degree. I think it'll be enough to win the division, but I think there'll be some more growing pains than most people might think.
Okay.
Second place, I'm going Indianapolis over
Wow.
Jacksonville.
Okay. All right.
I'm more of a believer in the Colts. You talked about Richardson. We know the health is a question mark. We know that if he can stay healthy, the guy can do a lot of things at the
Mm-hmm.
position as a dual threat. He's got some good weapons around him. We didn't even mention before Jonathan Taylor, I think could have a monster year this year. He doesn't have the
I love that
distraction
guy.
of the holdout and the
Yeah.
contract. That's all out of the way. I think he could just focus on playing football and being the best version of himself.
Good
And I
point.
think that carries the Colts a big way. So I think they're going to be a scrappy team right in the mix for one of the wild card spots, second place in the division. I'll take Jacksonville at 3. I've never been gung ho on Trevor Lawrence. I think, as you
You
know,
certainly
it's
haven't
kind
been.
of been my opinion from the
Yeah.
beginning. He got the big contract, so this is kind of the put up or shut up year for
Sure.
Lawrence. He's got to do it this year. But to me, there's still a lot of questions both sides of the ball there. Like I like certain aspects of this team. Got a decent running game there with ETN, decent receivers and tight ends. Evan Ingram, has found a home there, but I think this team is going to fall a little bit short again. I'm not really drinking their Kool-Aid too much. And then Tennessee, I have in fourth. I just don't think it's a very talented team. I don't really see much of an identity here. For so long, it was kind of the rough and tough Titans, right?
Yeah.
With Derrick Henry, the big bruiser in the backfield. Well, he's gone. You got Tony Pollard, who's a nice complimentary back, but he's not a guy that you're going to give the ball 25 times to, as the Cowboys kind of realized last year, and Pollard's effectiveness really kind of fell off. Levis, I feel like, could be kind of a mid-tier quarterback. I think that's his upside. Hopkins already dealing with an injury in this
He's a lot older.
preseason.
Yeah.
A big overpay in free agency with Calvin Ridley. Like, I think the guy's okay. I don't think he's, 80 or 90 million, whatever it was they paid him.
90, I believe.
So
Yeah.
I just think under first year coach Brian Callahan, I don't see the Titans doing much this year. I have them in the basement. So it starts with the Texans. I go Colts 2, Jacksonville, and round it out with
I
Tennessee.
like that. We have some variety so far in our first two divisions. I like that. Yeah, it's a lot of good points there. AFC North, Bry, I would say already, and it usually is the case, but I'll say it again, going to be the most difficult division in football and the toughest division. That seems to be a year in and year out thing. I am learning from my mistakes of last season, and I am picking the Ravens to win this division. I understand, again, they've lost defensive pieces similar to the Bills. They've lost their star defensive coordinator. McDonald is now the head coach over there in Seattle. I understand all those things, but it seems like the Ravens, they just know defense and special teams, right? Obviously, Harbaugh, a special teams coach, they get that right every single season. I have confidence in that. And now the two-time NFL MVP in Lamar Jackson. I know it's not crazy explosive over there, Zay Flowers aside, but I think they'll be able to figure it out. I think he has reason to have a huge chip on his shoulder given the way their season ended last year. And then bringing in Derrick Henry, man, amongst a team
Yeah.
that has been the top rushing team in the league year after year. I think that is going to do huge wonders and dividends for that offense. I am buying the Ravens, even if they're not the dominant version we saw last year. They're still going to be like a 12-win team. So I really do like this squad. In second, and this one I've gone back and forth in, but I'm just trusting. I am going to pick the Bengals. However, I don't like what's going on in Cincinnati. There's a
Yeah.
lot of hoopla going on. You got the Chase contract situation. Is that going to get resolved? He's talking about he might, there's reports that he might not play a game until the contract happens. T. Higgins, of course, is basically playing on a one-year deal. He's very unhappy. You had Hendrickson request a trade this offseason. He is still there. There's a lot of, to quote some of the stuff in the NFL, there's a lot of bad vibes going on in there. And then Burrow, he's been injured the last couple of years. He's had injuries his whole NFL career, and it's not been that long. A little bit of like, I do take a little bit from this is there a little bit of an identity thing? He goes and dyes his hair, and then it's like, they talked about his wrist injury. It's not something that's automatic. It could go again. You could have lingering effects. And they just haven't proven that not only they could protect him, that he can stay healthy. I have a lot of question marks here. And you lose Brian Callahan as well, and goes over to Tennessee. I have a lot of question marks with the Bengals. I think talent-wise, they could still be second or even threaten the division. But right now, I have no reason to trust that Burrow's going to finish the season. In third place, I've gone back and forth on this because the Steelers always end up being the Steelers. But I'm taking the Browns in third place. I am, and I'm putting the Steelers in the basement. I think this is the season, and not that I'm looking forward to this, so I don't say, oh, finally, as if I wanted this to happen. I don't care either way. But the Steelers, I feel like this is the first time under Tomlin they are not going to finish 500. I think this is, I'm just going to say it here, this is probably going to be the last season of Mike Tomlin as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. I think there is going to be a parting of ways at the end of the season. He might go into media. He could definitely get hired somewhere else. I just feel like this has come to a head. This has been going on even the last couple of years of Roethlisberger. The stuff I've seen of Wilson and Fields this preseason has been
Yeah.
bad, very, very bad.
Mhm.
And when you have two quarterbacks, you have none. And I think that is going to be a huge situation there. The offensive line looks one of the bottom five in the league, looks horrible. And guys like TJ Watt that you rely on, who's an incredible player, he's also a very injury prone player. So I don't really love what they have going on with the Steelers, and I think the Browns by default kind of get boosted up to third because I love Kevin Stefanski. I love some of the pieces here, but the Browns don't have a ton of depth. There's huge question marks with Deshaun Watson still. It's so tough, right? We've never seen a player like this where, like, we're talking about a guy in his first 3 years. This is like an all pro level quarterback, one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. He had, of course, all these things go off the field, multiple things go on, has come back. He looks like a bottom half of the league quarterback. I mean, he looks very bad. So I have a lot of wonders of what's going on in Cleveland, but I believe in the coaching staff a little bit more and some of the players they have a little bit more. So I'm having Ravens, Bengals, Browns, and the Steelers in a very competitive AFC North.
Yeah, well, we're in agreement on two of the spots, and then two we've got
That's our
flip-flopped. So
theme.
let's start at the top. I'm with you on the Baltimore Ravens. I think we're making amends to the
We are.
Ravens after last year's mistreatment of them, both of us having them third place. I guess not even making the playoffs, which
No,
in hindsight
which is
seems kind of
crazy.
crazy. I think we both felt like it could be a bit of a down year for Lamar
Yeah.
Jackson, and it turned out obviously to be an outstanding year.
Nope.
And I expect it will be another one. Uh,
Sorry,
this is a
Lamar.
team that is just it's a solid organization
Yeah.
top to bottom. When you think about the good organizations, the Ravens are right there at the top. They're well run from ownership to general manager to head coach. They have stability. They're a consistent winner, and there's no reason to believe why there'd be any kind of a fall off here. I mean, yes, they did lose a couple key players free agency on the defensive side. Well, Patrick Queen, I think, was a trade, right, to Pittsburgh, which that
Yes.
was kind of unusual. Um, but offensively, led by Lamar, and you mentioned Derrick Henry, the Titans' loss is the Ravens' gain. I mean, I think this is a perfect fit in that
Perfect.
backfield. They have been looking for a bell cow type running back, right? They tried Dobbins, he couldn't stay healthy. Gus Edwards, it's just been a barrage of different running backs that have gone through in Baltimore. Now you got Henry, who's a beast. Now he might not be quite what he was, but I think in that offense with that offensive line, he's going to do some hefty damage. And he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. And defenses now have to worry about Lamar's running and Henry. That's a lot to cover. And you got, wide receivers taking the next step. Zay Flowers, we know how talented he is. You got two good tight ends there. So I think the Ravens are going to be really, really formidable. I have them in first.
Okay.
You go to second, all the things you said about Cincinnati, that's why I have them dropped a peg. And
Okay.
I actually have Cleveland in
All
second. And
right.
I understand the questions here, and they are legitimate. But I'm feeling like we're going to get a little bit of a bounce back from Watson. I know
Okay.
that it hasn't been good lately, but I still believe there's good football in there. And I think he's got some good pieces around him. Now, Jerry Judy, right? He was a big disappointment in Denver.
Yeah, they paid him
Change of
some money.
scenery, former first round pick. I think he could be a nice weapon in that offense to go along with, Amari Cooper and Njoku at tight end. How healthy is Nick Chubb? That's a big question, but just his presence back in the backfield
Yeah.
is enormous. Your defense is led by one of the best in the game and Myles Garrett, even if they have some deficiencies elsewhere. I think this is a pretty talented team, and you mentioned Stefanski has become I would say, above average coach on the
Two
offensive side of the
two-time
ball.
head coach of
So
the
I
year.
think the Browns I think the Browns are going to surprise some people. I have
Perfect.
them in second place here. And all the things you said about Cincinnati are why I have them down a bit. As much as we all love Joe Burrow, and rightfully so, all the issues going on contractually with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and we're all a bunch of unhappy campers. You got a backfield that's a bit of a question mark, right? I think Zach Moss they brought
Yeah.
in to be the lead guy. Defense kind of fell off last year after
Mm-hmm.
being a very scrappy, solid unit for a couple of years. So I think this team has quite a bit to prove, and not foremost is Joe Burrow being healthy and
Absolutely.
playing like the Burrow that we know he's accustomed to. So I think the Bengals drop a bit here. I have them in third, and then fourth is Pittsburgh. And really, it just starts, as you alluded to. The quarterback situation there is nightmarish. I'm not even sure that it's better than it was last year. We know they gave up on Kenny Pickett, and he might not even make the backup role in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
so it just shows how far he's fallen. But Russell Wilson, I just don't think he's going to be able to turn back the clock here. And like you said, the preseason training camp, it has been a poor showing to say the least for both he and Justin Fields. So I think they're going to struggle on that side of the ball. As formidable as the defense may be with T.J. Watt, of course, coming off a major injury. I just think they're too deficient offensively, and like you said, you don't have a quarterback there. You're not going to have a chance to do big things. So I think it's going to be a long year in Pittsburgh. Don't know that it's going to cost Tomlin his job
Okay.
because it's a franchise that just doesn't like to make those kind of decisions. You know, they've had three coaches since the 1960s, which is remarkable.
Crazy.
But I just think the quarterback position holds them back and will do so again.
I just think at some point a change has to be made. Like something has to give because they feel like they're the same exact team. 9-8, they might make the playoffs, get blown out in the wild card, or just miss the playoffs. You got to do something. At some point, being just above 500 is not good enough. So we'll see how that plays out here. And Bry, finally, the AFC West, and I say finally just for the AFC, of course. I think this one pretty obvious. Chiefs at number one. I mean,
Yeah, I would say.
we definitely underestimated them, even though we had them at first last year. I think we underestimated them all season, rightfully so, because they did not. Let's not rewrite history. Their regular season last year was not good, okay, and they were just able to turn it on in the playoffs. They scrapped out some games, but this was not the same Chiefs offense. We said it all year long. We were right all year long. Even in the playoffs, they played very low scoring, very kind of like run centric ball control kind of games. And then, Patrick Mahomes is one of the best we've ever seen do it. I think this year it looks like Rice's kind of rumored suspension, given his kind of off season, that's going to be held off. They bring in the fastest guy in the NFL draft and Xavier Worthy. You still have Kelsey there. I think they're going to be a lot of fun again on offense. I think this is going to be another explosive year that we haven't seen really since Hill left. I'm excited. Now, they've had a tumultuous offseason. If there was any other person there beside Andy Reid where I would be concerned about the culture and keeping the guys together, because they've had a lot of guys have some legal issues this offseason, but I still believe in them on the field, and of course I believe in Patrick Mahomes. Number two, I've gone back and forth on because I'm like, I don't know here. I am going to go with the
Yeah.
Broncos. I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos. I like the vibes out of there. I like what I've seen out of Bo Nix. I liked him in college. We're talking about a guy who had over 60 starts in his college career, something we'll never see again because you had the whole COVID thing and everybody got an extra year or two and all that stuff that went on. We're talking about a guy who has really played ball. This is the perfect quarterback for Sean Payton. And even though I'm not saying that, this team is going to be a threat for, making some run for the playoffs and winning a game or something like that, they're going to be a competitive team. The defense is going to be better. I like some of the pieces here. Judy, I never really liked what he was about. He seemed more like a diva wide receiver. You get him out of there. I really like what they're building there in Denver. I think that could be some fun. Remember, they also beat the Chiefs last year. So I think Peyton has found his quarterback. I like that. The Chargers I have in third, and it is nothing. I know they bring in Harbaugh, right? It's a huge thing. I believe in Jim Harbaugh. It's not saying I'm not, but we're talking about Herbert, who's already dealing with some plantar fascia issues here. We know the deficiencies they have at wide receiver. They're a very injury-prone team, especially defensively, right? Bosa and Mack feel like, and Derwin James for that matter, feel like they're hurt all the time. I have no reason to believe that not a month into the season that these guys are not going to be out for 6 weeks. So I think there's going to be a rebuild process. I believe in Harbaugh long term, but I think for this season they'll be competitive. They won't be the travesty of Easton Stick that we were watching last season, but they are still going to go through it this year. There's going to be some bumps in the road, and I think in a very distant fourth is the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, I'm not trying to hate on Antonio Pierce. I think he did a great job in an interim sense, but I mean, let's just be real, Bry. Gardner Minshew's the starting quarterback. This is Gardner Minshew who, oh yeah, he played well in Indianapolis. He also had Shane Steichen. Okay, and I just think that when I look at it, you got a Devontae Adams that is clearly not happy. Could see him getting traded at the deadline. You got two young tight ends that I like in Michael Mayer, and now you bring in Brock Bowers. But other than that, I don't. The defense has been a mess for 10 years. You only have Max Crosby. I don't really love a lot of things there. They have a long rebuilding process over there in Las Vegas. I think they're going to be a very distant fourth, one of the worst teams in the league. So that's my AFC West. Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers, Raiders.
So this is the first division that we're in agreement one through
All right, I
four.
like it.
It starts with the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, any football person who comes on and gives another team to win the division other than the Chiefs is just looking for headlines, clearly, because they're not
Clickbait.
being realistic, and there's no reason to not believe the Chiefs are head and shoulders above everyone else in the division and maybe the AFC, because that's just the way it's been under tutelage of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, the all-world quarterback. Now, I will say I feel like Travis Kelce did kind of lose a step last year, and I'm interested. Does he have, another Hall of Fame Kelce season, or are we starting to see him on the
He had a
decline
great
now?
playoff
We know
run, though.
there's he did. We know there's a lot going on off the field that everybody's into, and I wonder if some of that, does serve as a bit of a distraction. So we'll see what we get out of him. But like you said, I mean, now with another playmaker and Worthy, a guy who's fast as lightning, it's just tailor made for that offense to thrive in. Then again, when Clyde Edwards-Helaire was drafted, people thought the same thing, like, oh, what a perfect fit this guy is, and he's been a disappointment. But that hasn't mattered because Pacheco, the seventh rounder from
He's
Rutgers,
been great.
has taken over and been very solid at the position. Probably a top 10 to 15 running back. So, yeah, the Chiefs, I think, are going to roll in this division once again, and obviously will be very formidable come the playoffs. Second place, I'm with you on Denver. We know the decision came. Bo Nix is the guy, as if, I mean, what were they going to go? Zach Wilson?
Right.
So, I mean, to me, it had to be Bo Nix. We've seen enough of Zach Wilson here in New
I know
York
you
to
have.
know Zach Wilson is at best a backup quarterback, or we're not going to see him thrive in another environment. And it's not just a case of, oh, it was the Jets and he goes somewhere and starts lighting it up. No, he's just not that good. So he'll sit on the bench. And I'm intrigued by Bo Nix. And certainly if Sean Payton is, I think they really could have something there, because they made the pick, and not a whole lot of action from Nix. And we know Peyton is kind of a quarterback whisperer. We know the kind of success he's had in his career. So I agree with you that they're building something. I think they're going to be competitive. I have them in second place here. Chargers, I mean, we've said it on the show since we've been doing this. The Chargers are going to charger.
They are.
And so, yes, Harbaugh comes over, but I agree with your take 100%. I think for the long term, he's the right guy. He'll be able to build this team. They will be very solid in years to come. But this first year is kind of a project. And like you said, you're already dealing with this Herbert injury. I mean, plantar fasciitis for a quarterback is not what you want to hear. And this is a guy who still has a lot to prove. You would like for him to go into that kind of a season coming in fully healthy, and that's not the case. And they've kind of stripped some of his weapons away, right? Like Keenan Allen is gone.
Mike
Austin
Williams.
Eckler was so heavily relied on there. He's out of town. So I just don't think there's a whole lot there on the offensive side of the ball. And then you mentioned the key players on defense and the injury prone nature. I just think it all adds up to a, 7 or 8 kind of win for the Chargers in the first year under Harbaugh. So I have them in third. Now I have the Raiders in fourth. I would say I'm a little higher on them than you. I don't think they're going to be one of the worst in the league, but I do think they're going to fall last in this division. And yes, Gardner Minshew is what he is. He's a journeyman quarterback. It seems like everywhere he goes, he gets an opportunity to
He
play.
does.
You give him credit, right? He always seems to be in position where a guy gets hurt and he steps in and plays. Last year it was Indianapolis after Richardson goes down. So he's a very solid backup. I'm not sure that he's a guy that you want to hand the keys to the starting job to. And that's what the Raiders have done here. It's not as though there's great options. I mean, Aiden O'Connell, we saw him last year. He's doesn't thrill you. So, but on offense, like you said, you got Brock Bowers there, very highly touted. You still have Devontae Adams, even if he's not healthy. He's a guy that's going to produce. And Zamir White actually fairly impressive in the backfield last year after Josh Jacobs kind of went down. So I think offensively, they're going to be okay. Defense outside of Max Crosby, not a lot to like there. And they've had some years, as you mentioned recently, that have just been some of the worst defenses you've ever seen. So with all that said, I have them a little better than you, but still last place. But nonetheless, we have the four all in the same order.
I like that. I like having a little consistency there. I will say, just keep a little storyline to watch out for, and it all depends on the college football season, but wouldn't be surprised. Raiders top of the draft, near the top of the draft, Las Vegas, Shador Sanders, Deion Sanders kind of thing going there. Keep your eye out on that. I'm just saying, I think that could be a lot of fun and feed into the entertainment of that. So, Bry, let's switch over to the NFC. Let's do it, and let's start in the NFC East. This is going to be some controversial for some of our fans out here. But, we got to call it like we see it. I've gone, I think, in this division, this has been the most difficult I've had of going back and forth of like, oh my God, like who is going to win this? I don't feel good about really any of these teams. I think they all have significant flaws. But at the end of the day, I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles. I'll be honest, and I'll be very transparent with you and the audience up front. I don't like anything going on there. The Hurts and Sirianni stories that have come out, not great. Okay, that they're not connecting, that Sirianni's tried to go in there and X things out of the playbook. There was times they weren't even talking to each other. They don't really enjoy each other's company. They just kind of tolerate it, and Hurts tolerates them. That's not what you want out of a head coach QB relationship. You're bringing two brand new coordinators this offseason. Yeah, everybody got paid, but now, there's a lot of moving parts here. You bring in Barkley. They just traded for Jahan Dotson from the Commanders. Those are two new guys to install in the offense, particularly Dotson. We're less than 2 weeks away from the start of the season. So that's a lot of moving parts. And then in the draft, I love what they did, drafting two corners at the top, clearly addressing that their secondary was putrid last season, but those guys have been hurt in training camp. It's a lot of new pieces of gel. Does Vic Fangio still have it as a defensive coordinator? A lot of question marks there. I just think in the end, they're the most talented team at this point in this division. So by default, I kind of give it to them. I honestly think all these teams, besides the Giants, and we'll get to them in a second, are going to be very close to each other. I could see the Eagles 10 wins and they win the division. I do not think they're going to be a 12-13 win team. I think it's going to be a very tight division. The Cowboys I have in second place here. Again, same thing with them. Have not liked the vibes as well. I think they're consistent. They win at home. Could see them winning 10 games, but maybe Philadelphia has a better division record, so they win the division like that. But you got Dak, basically, he's playing in his last year, might be his last year in Dallas. McCarthy up in the air. You sign Mike Zimmer as the defensive coordinator when Dan Quinn goes and takes the head coaching job in Washington. Mike Zimmer on a 1-year deal. We never see new coordinators get brought in like that. It's kind of like a lame duck year. Do not like that. They didn't sign Micah Parsons. That's fine. He's going into year 4. He's only through 3 years. Okay. But the CeeDee Lamb stuff where he's not even practicing, he's not even there, why he hasn't been signed, I think is absolutely baffling. Do not like that situation there. They've lost some offensive line pieces. Okay, we didn't love Pollard as a starting running back, but who'd they replace him with? You bring back in Zeke? Like, what are we doing here? And everybody outside of Lamb is not even that great, and he's not there. Then we get the news today that Deron Bland, their all-pro corner, is out for 6 to 8 weeks. He has a stress fracture in his foot. So he's gone, and we know what Diggs is coming back off of. There's a lot of moving pieces there in Dallas. They'll win at home because they play excellent at home, but I think there is a lot of question marks with that team, and I could see huge changes next season. Maybe no McCarthy, maybe no Dak going into Dallas next season. I have the Commanders here in third place. I think they're going to be improved. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team, but I like Jaden Daniels. I think I know he's a little bit skinny, so you have to protect him, but I like the pieces around him. I do like some pieces of this defense. I just like the overall change from top to bottom, right? The owner changed this offseason, the GM changed, the head coach changed, all the staff changed, the quarterback changed, everything has changed. I think they can make 6 wins maybe and make some noise and can be kind of like a competitive team. I think there's something there. And then the Giants, DJ, Cal, any of my Giants fans, Dredge, anyone else watching. This is going to be a long year for you guys. I know I'm viewed sometimes on this podcast or in real life as a Giants hater. I'm really not. I root for this team. I try to root for the local teams outside of the Rams. This is going to be a very bad season for the Giants. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. They're probably going to have a top 2 or 3 pick. The defense has some pieces, don't get me wrong, but this offense, it's not great. Their quarterback is really bad. I've been saying this for 2 or 3 years, and no one wanted to listen to me. I said this even when he won a playoff game. I said it's a mirage. It's fake. Do not pay this guy. It's the wrong decision. He's throwing pick sixes in the preseason, Brian. This is going to be a very, very long year for the New York Football Giants. And, yeah, I have them in a very, really rough spot there in fourth.
Yeah, so the NFC East is always a fascinating division, isn't it? I feel like this is a division that's the most unpredictable, where you can get like a winner out of nowhere. It's like, oh wait, Washington won this division out of the blue, and the Cowboys really fell off, or the Eagles were really bad, or they were great. Like, there's a lot of variance with this division year to year, not a lot of consistency. So this is the one that I went a little bit out on a limb on, or more than a little bit, I
Okay.
would say, with one of my picks in particular. So we'll get to that. But we start in agreement. I have Philadelphia in the top spot. I think I'm a little less concerned about some of the things that are going on there. I mean, they have to figure out exactly what it was at the end of last season that went on there, because
Yeah.
we'd never seen a
Never.
team collapse like they did. I mean, it was just downright bizarre down the stretch of the season how that team just failed to execute on every level and went limping into the playoffs and got just bashed in Tampa Bay by the Bucks.
Wow.
I mean, so they really, what happened at the end of the season, they really have to find a way to turn the page. And they've lost a lot of leadership, not just with the coordinators, but the retirements of Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox. There's a lot to overcome there. But that said, like, I still feel like top to bottom, this is one of the more talented rosters
Yeah.
that's been assembled. The GM Howie Roseman has really done a great job. I think Barkley's going to be a seamless fit in that offense and really have a big season, because he finally runs behind a quality offensive line, which is something that he never got to
Yeah.
do as a member of the Giants, and still found a way a couple of years to produce. So I think he really could find success there. And, they've got 3 now solid receivers, one the newcomer, as you mentioned, Dotson, but the 2 big guns, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, there aren't too many better combos than those 2. Jalen Hurts, I think last year was dealing with more of an injury than he let on. So if he's healthier with that kind of weaponry, Goddard at tight end, Barkley in the backfield, I think they're going to be pretty potent on the offensive side of the ball. I think it's going to be a very solid season for the Eagles. I got them winning it. Second place. Again, you outlined all of the issues with the Dallas Cowboys, and you helped make my case why I've dropped them to the third spot in the division,
You doing it?
and I'm going with the shocker, Washington, second place.
Okay.
I see a little bit of history repeating here. You go back, right, the year was 2012. Washington had the second pick of the draft, took quarterback Robert
23.
Griffin III. First year worked out awfully well. They won the division, they made the playoffs. Now they limped out first round to Seattle, and Griffin ended up getting hurt and
Changed his whole
really
career.
didn't have much of a career after
Yeah.
that rookie sensation. But you fast forward, a decade plus later, second pick of the draft, take a quarterback. I'm high on Jaden Daniels. I really
Okay.
think this guy's going to be a player. I think he's going to change the whole culture there. I think Washington's going to surprise some people and win some games that maybe you don't think. Running back wise, you got Eckler now with Brian Robinson in the backfield. I think that's a nice little 1-2. Always liked McLaurin as a number 1 weapon. Zach Ertz comes in at tight end. I think he can still play and be a nice security blanket for the young quarterback. Dan Quinn, maybe he learned from what was an up and down first go round as a head coach with Atlanta, where of course he did get to a Super Bowl,
Yeah,
and we know what happened in that blowing of a game against New England. But he gets a second chance here. I think he's going to be motivated to really, show people that he learned a lot from that first experience. I got Washington led by Daniels in second place in this division. And we go to third where I had the Cowboys falling off. I am very worried about this Cowboy team. I think there are a lot of issues, as you documented. And I'll be honest, I feel like this is a team that I know very well just because they're always on. I
always.
mean, every Sunday in the 4 o'clock window, you put on a game, the Cowboys are playing. So I feel like this is a team that we get to see on a week in, week out basis, that outside of the locals, I like know this team inside and out year after year, and all the things that have gone on. If we're being honest, they probably should have made the coaching change after last year's
Absolutely.
playoff exit. That was
Absolutely.
a total no-show against the Packers, where everything went wrong. And I know they put up elite numbers in the regular season offensively, but that was the game to make a change.
Yeah.
And now I just feel like they're looking at this year as just let's get through it and then we make wholesale changes. And you can't go into a season with that kind of mentality,
No.
especially when you're a team that has every eyeball in America on you, like the Cowboys.
Yeah.
So I just think everything that's gone on there, Dak just has way too much on his shoulders if he's going to play games without CD in the lineup, and that whole situation remains unknown. The running back issues, as you document, Deron Bland is a huge playmaker in that defense. I mean, how many pick sixes last year? I think he broke a record
Yeah.
with
He
like
said it.
4 or 5 of them. So I just think this team takes a massive step back to like a 7-win kind of team, and then
Wow.
I think they make big time changes. Yeah, I think it's going to be a long, long year in Dallas. I don't like anything about what's going on there, so I have
Whew.
them in third. And then the Giants. I wanted to believe earlier in the offseason that maybe they could be decent, and then they went
You
out
watched
and
Hard
beefed up
Knocks and
the
you were like, oh,
defense.
maybe I'll buy in
Brian
here.
Burns. Yeah, and then like you said, you put on the tape of that
Yeah.
preseason game, and I know you don't want to put too much stock into it, but the reality is they're playing all their starters in that game. Like
Yep.
that is the unit that's going to be
Yep.
out there come week one. And what we saw was an awful display of quarterbacking. I mean, throwing a pick six when you're backed up deep near your own end zone is just bad football. So, I mean, offensively, I feel like they're just trying to put a bandage on it with the draft pick
Hmm.
of Neighbors, who we know is looked explosive, and people are saying he's going to be the next Justin Jefferson, all these things. It'll help, sure, but it's not enough when you're deficient in every other area. The offensive line, I guess, will be a little better. It couldn't be worse than it was last year, but still, the quarterback is a problem. The line is still a problem. There's not enough outside of Neighbors, and I agree with you. Like all the good from year one of the Dayball era, it all went out the window last year. I know they kind of won some games late. The DeVito story was nice and everything, but now it just looks like they're back to being in their same old ways where they're stuck. And I have a feeling they're gonna look and say the answer is a coaching change, which I don't think it is.
Yep.
The roster is what the problem is with this team, and I'm with you. I just think it's going to be another long year.
Yeah, I watched the whole Hard Knocks on them. It was very interesting. It was interesting to have the Hard Knocks as part of the offseason and seeing that process. It was very fascinating to watch. And they brought in Runyon, they brought in Illuminor at the offensive line. I think they'll be better there, but it I like the Brian Burns. I think they got him for a steal. All that's great, but they've still lost Xavier McKinney. They lost Barkley. And when you have these explosive weapons like potentially Malik Neighbors, I still like Hyatt that's there. You need a quarterback to get them the ball. And Daniel Jones, no one is being honest. I feel like when I talk to people that this guy is not it. I've been saying that since he got drafted, and his one good season where he won a playoff game, the only 2 games he had that season were both against Minnesota, including the playoff game because their defense was atrocious. He threw 15 touchdowns the whole season. I mean, what are we talking about? They are not going to be a team, and I agree with you. I could see them firing Dayball, and I like him as coach. And it's like, you guys made this decision to commit to Jones. On Hard Knocks, we saw that you were trying to trade up to draft a quarterback. So you clearly do not believe in Daniel Jones. It's gonna be a long season for Giant fans, so buckle up. Maybe we'll have a few on the podcast during the season. Brian, let's get to the NFC South. This could be an interesting division because it's a lot of interesting teams that I don't think are great, but I think they could be fun. I'm taking Atlanta. I'm buying the Kool-Aid. I know we have been burnt on this show time and time again by the Atlanta Falcons. You bring in Kirk Cousins. I'm not worried about the Michael Penix situation. They get Justin Simmons just came in. They got Matthew Judon that just came in. I like what they have at receiver here. I think you could have breakout years from London and the tight end in Kyle Pitts. And I think this is the year we're going to talk about, man, is Bijan Robinson the best running back in the NFL? We're going to see that this season. I think they're going to be a lot of fun. They bring in a new staff. You bring in 2 Rams over there and Raheem Morris coming in. And then you have a change of the offensive coordinator and Zach Robinson. I like coming from the McVay tree, what they learn. You get Raheem Morris getting kind of a second chance here in Atlanta. I am believing in the Falcons. I think they're going to be a good team with not a difficult schedule as well. So I think that really helps them there. I think the Bucs are going to be in second place. They've lost some pieces. Some guys are older there. But I kind of like the vibes they have there with Baker. I think there's enough pieces there that they can be sniffing around the playoffs come that last month of the season. So I still do like what the Bucs represent. We thought they'd be one of the worst teams in the league last year. They really had some surprise where they were a couple plays from the NFC Championship and beating Detroit in Detroit last year. I really like what they have going there. Kind of a nice thing to get Baker kind of a second lease on his QB career. In third place here, and this little shocker, maybe not. I'm still gonna pick the Saints. Now, I'm going to pick the Saints with a caveat. I do not think Derek Carr will be the quarterback by the end of this season. There's been a lot of talk coming out of camp about Spencer Rattler. They like what they see. He's been playing well. I think where there's smoke, there's fire. And we know this did not click last year with Derek Carr. We saw him screaming at teammates last season. I think he's going to get benched about halfway through the year. So I don't think they're going to be a great team. They're in salary cap hell. They're going to definitely fire Dennis Allen. Honestly, I don't even know how he's still the head coach of this team. But they, I think, could potentially have something there in Rattler. They do have a lot of offensive weaponry that they're not been able to use since Breeze has retired. I have them in third place. There's definitely a gap between the Bucs and the Saints there. And then the Panthers. Man, oh man, the Panthers, bro, I have a lot of questions. They take Bryce Young, number 1 overall last season. A lot of us could see that was the wrong pick over CJ Stroud. And we had concerns, and we talked about this guy is small. He is really small. He looks like a little kid out there when it comes to it. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just saying he looks like that when you see him against other NFL players out there, other men out there. We saw it last season. He is limited in some regards. They do not have a lot of offensive talent. You trade away Brian Burns as well on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're in for another bad year. We might be talking by come the end of the season, if this goes south quick, moving on from Bryce Young and getting another quarterback come next season, especially if they're at the top of the draft here and the Bears don't have their pick. I mean, let's be real, Bri. They had this pick this past season. I think they pulled the Cardinals and they took Caleb Williams, even though the Cardinals had Rosen and then they went Kyler Murray back-to-back years. If they had their first overall pick and didn't trade it away to the Bears, they would have taken Caleb Williams this year, and Bryce Young would be on another team right now. Let's just be honest about the situation. I think they're very limited of what they can be. They might be sort of a little more competitive, but I am not a believer in Carolina at all. They're going to be very bad.
Yeah, we're in agreement here, 1 through 4, which I think is the second division, the other being the AFC West. So start with the Falcons. Very trendy with the offseason they've had. I mean, when you bring in a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who we know is not an elite player at the position, but he's a guy that, as he's advanced in his career, has gotten better. And I think last year, he was really playing his best football at the time he went down with that season-ending injury. I would have liked to see what the Vikings could have done with that full season of Cousins last year.
He was
So
having
he
like an
comes
MVP
over.
like year.
He really was. And now he goes to a really good situation where he's got good players around him. He's got a coaching staff that should be able to get a lot more out of them than did the previous regime. I mean, when you think of the Falcons last year, they went wrong because the quarterbacks weren't good enough and the coaching wasn't good
Mm-hmm.
enough. It was Taylor Heineke and the Desmond Ritter, who's now gone. So, and they make the coaching change, as you know, with Raheem Morris, the former Rams coordinator. I think he's going to do a nice job there, and be able to get something out of the talented pieces, like you said, Bijan Robinson showing why he could be one of the best in the game, which he didn't get a chance to do under Arthur Smith last year. Finally, see something out of Drake London and Kyle Pitts. So I think offensively, this could be one of the better teams in the league. And even if they aren't great on the other side of the ball, they're going to be able to put up points. And the rest of the division is pretty lackluster. So I think the Falcons, it would be a big disappointment if the Falcons did not win this division. I
Huge.
think that's fair to say. Tampa Bay, I'm going in second. As you rehashed last year, we were not at all on this team. We thought they'd be one of the worst in the game, and we didn't count on it. Baker Mayfield had a little spunk in him and showed that he could play at a fairly high level, which he did. I think one of the keys was, though, Dave Canales, the offensive coordinator, who now is out. So how
He's
will
in
Baker do
Carolina.
with a new he is in Carolina, so we'll see how Baker does under a new coordinator. But again, like decent offense. I mean, I'm not a huge believer in Todd Bowles as a head coach, but I think the Bucks will be able to hang around. I don't think they'll be quite as good as they were last year. They kind of pulled some games out of the fire late. That game against Houston stands out where Baker was matching dimes with CJ Stroud. But I think they'll be okay and good enough for second place. Third, the Saints. It's another team that's just like, right? Like
Yep.
there's not a whole lot exciting here. I mean, Dennis Allen, we agree, like he's not a very good head coach. He hasn't been able to get the most out of this team. Offense has some promise. Olave, I think, is a good number one guy receiver. Kamara, we know what kind of work he's done in the league, although it's fallen off a bit the last year or so. So they got some guys, but the quarterback, Derek Carr, is kind of in decline at this point.
Yeah.
Like you said, you think he's going to get replaced. I just don't think, like I said, I think they're kind of mediocre. They're going to be like a 7-win team. That's how I see the Saints. And then Carolina, it's a long way to go. I mean, last year they were downright terrible. I think there'll be a modicum of a step forward,
Maybe.
with a new offensive mind in there. Bryce Young has to be a little bit better, I would think. But I mean, maybe last year they won 2 games. They could double that and
Yeah,
get to
win
4.
4.
I'll say. But it's obviously not a very good team and has a long way to go. And it just shows you that you take a quarterback at number one and you're wrong about him, you set your franchise back 5 years
Yep.
minimum, and it's a problem.
Yeah, and to be fair to Bryce Young, they've given him nothing. I mean, like he's had. I mean, look at his receiving core last year. His best receiver was a 2-year-old Adam Thielen, 33-year-old Adam Thielen. Like they've given him nothing. They traded away his top receiver and an All-Pro receiver in DJ Moore to Chicago, and we've seen how that's worked out. So, in just fairness to Bryce Young, they've really not helped the guy at all. Going over the NFC North, I think this is going to be a really fun competitive division. Be right up there with the AFC North. Number one, I'm not deviating from this. I think there's been a little bit of hoopla online about this. The Lions are going to win this division, okay? They're a good team. They're a physical team. They're a talented team. They're going to win the division. I'm not saying that they're going to win the Super Bowl or even get there, but let's not. Sometimes we fall in love with some popular picks. We know this team is consistent. We've seen it even when they weren't making the playoffs 2 years ago and they were 9-8, knocking the Packers out. Hell, when they were 3-13-1, we've seen the what Dan Campbell brought to this team. They're gonna be a solid team. It's gonna be like a 12-win team. I really like what they have going on there. Second, I'm picking the Packers. I'm believing in Jordan Love, even though it was only really 8 games and a couple good playoff games. The Niners going to be kind of tailed off there in the second half when they really had it in hand. But I believe in what the structure of this team is. I liked last season to see really what LaFleur was about, right? It was always like him and Rodgers when he came in. It's like, well, how much of this offense really in the play calling is Rodgers doing it, right? Like, what does this guy really have to offer? We've seen that last season. Mentoring his own quarterback, a guy that they brought in, that they drafted, that they believed in. He sits for the 2 or 3 years and now gets to come in. He gets the new contract. I think he's going to be feeling good. He's going to play loose. I love the young weapons on this team. And defensively, they made a change of coordinator. They've tried some pieces there. We'll have to see what happens. But I am believing in the Packers as a team. And then I'm putting in third place the Bears. And this isn't a normal third place team. I think this team, and we'll get to it a little bit later, can threaten or even make the playoffs. I think they have a shot here with Caleb Williams. You're bringing Roman Dunze. You already have DJ Moore, who gets a nice new contract extension. You bring in Keenan Allen. On defense, the disrespected Jalen Johnson, not even making the NFL top 100, one of the best corners in the league. Roquan Smith, Montez Sweat that they brought in from Washington last year. I really like what they have going on in Chicago. And then the Vikings are going to be a feisty fourth place team. Now, I think they would have been a little bit feistier about 2-3 weeks ago before McCarthy went down, before Addison was getting injured. They've had a very tragic and difficult offseason. Of course, they lost one of their rookie corners. He sadly passed away, and I believe it was a car accident. They've had a rough offseason, the Minnesota Vikings. But I believe in Kevin O'Connell. I believe in, them having Justin Jefferson there on his new contract. I think they could be a 6-7 win team. It just depends on, is your boy over there, Sam Darnold, up to the challenge as he has kind of a new lease on life here as the unquestioned starter. We'll have to see what happens, but that's my NFC North, Brian.
Yeah, so I'm going a little bit different on this division. I think I'm repeating one from last year where I was high on one team. I picked him to win the division last year. This year I'm going to have him in second, but we'll start with first, where I think it's pretty clear cut the Detroit Lions, who, top to bottom again, one of the more solid teams in the league. I mean, Jared Goff has really found a home there with his array of weapons. St. Brown has become a real star. They got a nice 1-2 punch in the backfield with Gibbs and David Montgomery. And Dan Campbell has done just a tremendous job. I mean, there's no doubt when you start a coaching career and that first year goes as sour as it did, to turn things around and really change the culture and the whole dynamic and feel around them. I think it's a team that's built to be good for the long term. I don't see them taking a step back. I think they're going to be very competitive year in and year out and win this division for a second straight year. Now, I'm not as big on two of the teams that everybody's high on in
Okay.
this division. So for that reason, I'm going with the Vikings in second
Oh, man.
place. Now I know
You are
this
a
might be
Vikings believer,
bit
man.
a bit out on a limb. I don't know what it is with me and the Vikings. I don't know if it's that beautiful stadium, if it's the purple uniforms, if it's watching Adrian Peterson growing up, but
Yeah.
something about the Vikings just appeals to me. I don't know what it is, and we know, there's some questions, obviously, quarterback wise, but I feel like Darnold can be successful in this offense.
Okay.
I mean, he's got probably the most talented player in the game on the offensive side of the ball as a non-quarterback in Justin
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson. I mean, the guy is that good. We know about Addison's situation. If he's on the field, he had a very nice rookie season. Hawkinson at tight end. I think they're going to be better in the running game. Last year was kind of a disappointment in that category with Madison. Move on from him. You get Aaron Jones in the division. I like that pickup. Defensively, you got Brian Flores, is a good defensive mind running the show there. So I think this team can surprise some people. I really do. And I'm not as much digging the Packers and Bears as everybody else is. So give me the Vikings. I'm gonna be a little different here. We don't want to
How
have the
about
same
that?
picks for every division. So give me the purple in second place in the NFC North. And then third, I'm going with Green Bay.
Okay.
I know everybody is feeling the love. I know all you need is love and all of this. But the guy has played, let's call it half of a good season,
Yes,
and now we're going to pay him as though
it's a
he's an
risk.
elite quarterback, one of the top in the league. I mean, when I saw that contract, I was like, can he prove a little more? I mean, we're that sold. I think
Yeah,
it's really just looking at the past quarterbacks and like, oh, we've seen enough. Well, he's going to be, even if he's not Favre Rodgers, he's the next 10-year quarterback. I don't know about that. I mean, the guy has played a handful of good games. He was impressive in the playoffs, yes, but I don't think he's going to be this outstanding quarterback. I really don't.
that's
And
fair.
the receivers, Christian Watson's always got a hamstring problem, so I don't think they got great. I mean, Doubs is okay. But I'm not looking at this offense and like, wow, this it could be like a really dynamic offense. I'm actually more impressed with their defense, if anything, with that team. So
You don't like the
I
addition
think
of
they'll
Josh
be
Jacobs?
okay. I think it's solid, sure, but I look at this team as like an 8 win, maybe nine. I don't think they're 11 or 12 like some people are thinking, and that Love is like the truth at the position. And to me, that contract is way overboard. I mean, I would want to see the guy prove it for another whole season before I make that kind of commitment. So that to me was a little bit out there. I think the Packers are going to fall a bit short of those high expectations. And then the Bears. I mean, the reality is, yes, they've had a good offseason. It all looks good on paper. I agree with that. Caleb Williams might be the next great quarterback. But to me, it's all mites. I mean, this team hasn't proven anything. They have consistently been a losing franchise. I don't know that Matt Eberflus is the guy that's going to get this team over the hump.
Yeah.
So I just want to see the Bears go out and win 9 or 10 games before I can commit to them as like the second place team that's going to challenge for a playoff spot. I have them more in the 7-8 win range,
Yep.
and it's a competitive division. I think, like the Packers, they're going to fall a little short. Look, maybe I'll be totally wrong. The Vikings stink, and Love is great, and the Bears are great, but we're going to play it a little differently. We'll see how it goes on the field.
Hey, I like it. I disagree with you, but I do like you willing to go out on a limb and stick to your beliefs on that one. And Bry, finally, the NFC West, home of my Los Angeles Rams. I think clear cut. I know there's been some noise this offseason, but the 49ers are winning this division. Let's be real. They dominate the Rams. They're a great football team. Now, I will say, like a lot of these top teams in the NFC, I'm a little concerned, right? I'm not a huge believer in Brock Purdy as this elite level quarterback. He's solid. Going to be some question marks come the end of the year, going into next year of do we give him the giant contract extension, right? Debo and Kittle, good players, real good players, Pro Bowl players, very injury prone. So that's a factor of it. Now you have the whole Ayuk situation. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? It looked like he was traded. The Patriots and the Browns and the Steelers all wanted him. He outright denied the Browns and the Patriots. They couldn't get the compensation right with the Steelers. With the Browns, almost Amari Cooper was a Niner. There's a lot of mess going on there. And then the biggest story that I feel like is getting undercut by the Ayuk news is Trent Williams is not here. Okay, he is having a training camp holdout. We know from his time in Washington, he has no problem missing regular season games. That's your blindside protector. That's one of the best to ever do it. That's a future Hall of Famer. A massive, massive issue that is not having him there, considering the rest of the offensive line is kind of like they're mid. They're not really that great. So that's a huge concern there. And defensively, we know what they are. But to be fair, Ofunga coming off a major injury, Bosa is historically, just like his brother, pretty damn injury prone. I don't know how much I love. I think this team is going to be solid. They're going to win probably 12 games because they're a dominant physical team and Kyle Shanahan's a great coach. But it feels like we've just reached this ceiling. We're hitting every season with this team. And yes, the ceiling is fantastic. They get to the Super Bowl. They've gotten to the NFC Championship, 4 out of the last 5 years? But just seems like they can never get over this hump. I don't know if they're going to again this year. So there is a little more concern going into them than in past years. They're still going to win the division. I'm putting the Rams in second place now. I will say Rams are going to have a very similar season that they had last year. 9 or 10 wins. They're not going to be overly great. They have a very difficult opening schedule. I am very concerned about the offensive line injuries they've had and a lot of the injuries they've had in camp. It's not been great. Darius Williams has been hurt. We lost De'Aaron Kendrick for the year to a torn ACL. About 6 different offensive linemen have been hurt. Kyron's been in and out of lineup. Stafford had a whole hamstring issue going on. Puka had a banged up knee. There's a lot of fluctuation going on there, but I believe in McVay. I believe in what this offense is. This defense is one of the youngest and most interesting in the NFL. Now, the elephant in the room, of course, is Aaron Donald is no longer here. He is retired. He's a surefire Hall of Famer, first ballot. He's no longer here, but I like what they have done. You have Kobe Turner coming back there in the second season. I think he should have won Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. You bring in Jared Verse with your first-round pick, the first time the Rams have had a first-round pick since Jared Goff. Then you come back in the second round and get his teammate there at Florida State in Brandon Fisk. So you bolster that defensive line immediately, and I think they are going to show a lot of stuff there. It's just going to really depend on health. The Seahawks are going to be in third place, and I know people are very big believers out there in the Seahawks, but McDonald's is a first-time head coach. I'm not the biggest. Geno's solid, but we know what Geno Smith is at this point. And they have a lot of offensive talent in Metcalf, and you have Jackson Smith and Njigba over there, and Tyler Lockett. But they got 2 very injury-prone but talented offensive tackles. The defense has been not great in the last couple of years. Is McDonald going to be able to make that big of a stride this season? I don't know. I see them as a very 8-9, 9-ish, 9-8 kind of team like they were last year. Don't think they're making some huge leap that some people have them. And then the Cardinals, they're going to be a feisty fourth place, okay? Under Jonathan Gannon, we saw they played hard last year. You have a full season of Kyler Murray. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. coming in. I think they can make some noise over there. McBride at tight end. There could be some pieces going on with the Cardinals, but what are they going to win? 6 games, maybe? Like they're still going to be a bottom team, but I think there is purpose to believe that they're going to build. The problem is their ownership is one of the worst, if not the worst in the league. They're cheap. They treat their employees bad. We've seen all the reports come out on that in the last couple of years. They kind of have a ceiling on how good they could be based on their ownership, but that's my NFC West, Bry.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a theme that when you look at the league as a whole, that there's not a whole lot of great teams and there's not a whole lot of really bottom
Yeah.
teams. It feels like most of the league is kind of in the middle at between like 7 and 10 win mark, like where we're going through the divisions, and a lot of the fourth place teams we're thinking like they're not
They'll
that
be
bad, like
feisty.
they can
Yeah.
win their share of games. And I agree. We're in agreement here, 1 through 4 again.
All
I
right.
think it's pretty clear cut the way this lines up. I mean, the 49ers we've been high on, rightfully so. They've been just terrific year in and year out. Now, last year they started off just on fire and then kind of hit that skid,
They did.
right around weeks 8 through 12, where they were not looking nearly as good after, I mean, looking untouchable in the early part of the season. Everything was clicking. I think it's going to be another big year. Yes, they have to figure out some of the issues. I mean, the Ayuk situation is kind of puzzling. It seems like, some of the things you've read that he should be on another team by now. It was
Right.
almost like a deal was agreed to when we thought he was gone at Pittsburgh or New England or whatever the case may be, but he's still there. And by the way, like he's a very valuable piece for
Mm-hmm.
Brock Purdy. I mean, so I would be not be looking to trade him. I would be wanting him to be one of my foundational pieces on the offensive side of the ball. And we know how talented this team is, offense, defense. McCaffrey, one of the best, though he has a bit of an injury this
Yeah, he's
preseason.
hurt now.
Yeah. Debo and the list goes on. Kyle Shanahan running the show. They're just a terrific operation with, yes, some things to figure out, but I think it's at least a 12-win team once again this year, and I think will be very tough to beat. I'm going with your Rams in the second spot. Last year, they kind of caught some people by surprise, right? Like the offense was blazing at times last year with Puka Nakua's emergence. He just had an unreal rookie season,
Incredible.
just phenomenal. Probably takes a little bit of a step back. I don't think you can expect him to be quite as good, but he's still going to be good. I
Yeah.
mean, the guy's just a really good player. What kind of Cooper Cup do you get this year? I think is a good question. And I think it, should be we've seen the best of him. I don't think there's any question about that, but he can still be a very good, you know, guy in the slot there. So I like this team on offense. Like you mentioned, they're very young. The running back Kyron Williams had a huge year last year. I like Blake Corum, who was a
Love it.
star at Michigan. I think he's going to be a nice
Yeah,
second
love it.
running back there. So they're going to be formidable. Yes, they'll have to answer some questions on defense without Aaron Donald, and they're very young there, but I think your Rams are going to have themselves a nice season. And then Seattle, I go with in third. I think, again, they'll be like 2 years ago, they were broke out and were pretty good, and then last year wasn't quite as good. I think Gino will probably play a little better than he did last year. Got three solid receivers. There aren't a lot of teams that go three deep at the receiver position, but with Lockett and Metcalf and JSN, they're solid there. We'll see what you get on the defensive side with McDonald coming over as the head coach. I think they'll be like in the 8 or 9 win area. So I have them in third place. And Kenneth Walker, I think, out of the backfield will have himself a nice year. And then Arizona, who has just been downright terrible for a couple of years, I think you will see signs of life with Kyler back for the start of a season, having a legitimate number one. I mean, everybody loves Marvin Harrison. Seems like the sky's the limit for this guy. Offensively, they could definitely be fun with
It could
him and
be.
with McBride and Connor running the ball. The defense is probably going to allow a lot of points. They might be a
Yeah.
team that plays some shootouts. They'll have to score a lot
They're
to
gonna be big
win.
fantasy
I think they'll
players.
definitely, yeah. And Kyler is definitely trendy in that department. So they're going to score points and will hang their way around games more so than they have. But in the end, I think it'll result in a last place finish. So again, we're in agreement to close out our final division. And I guess now we go into the playoff picks.
I'm excited, Brian. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope you guys are still with us here. I know this is going to be a long podcast, but it is every year because that's the nature of doing the prediction podcast. So, Brian, let's get into our seeds. We're going 1 through 7 in each conference of who we are picking. Let's start in the AFC. Who is our 1 through 7? I'll go first, unless you want to take it.
I'll take the NFC. You to the
You
A's.
got it. All right. I think number one in the AFC, I believe they are back. I believe this is going to be a supercharged offense, and I'm picking the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm believing in them. I'm taking them in the first spot, and I think they're going to be explosive, maybe a 13-win team, going for the first time ever, the three-peat. Other teams have gone for it, but have never completed it. They're going to have a real shot to do that this year. This is a new age. This is the Kansas City Chief and the Patrick Mahomes, of course, age. And we're going to have a lot of talks about Andy Reid come the end of the season, I think, maybe being the GOAT. I think that's a possibility there. In the number 2 spot, I've kind of went back and forth on who I wanted to have in this spot. I am drinking the Kool-Aid, though, and I believe the Houston Texans will be the number 2 seed in the league. I think they have the right stuff. I believe in what they are. I believe in D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio at GM. I think I'm going to take them at the number 2. I think they're going to take that leap. In the number 3 spot, I'm going to have the Baltimore Ravens. We've talked about them, their consistency. I believe Lamar has been extremely disrespected this offseason. I think people don't believe in him until they see it come the playoffs. We know this guy is in the regular season. He wins over 75% of the games that he plays in. They're going to be in the 3rd spot. And then at number 4, of course, naturally would be the other division winner, the Buffalo Bills. They will 10-11 win team. They're going to take some steps back, but I believe in Josh Allen there. And sure, he does have some to prove there as well. At the number 5 spot, being the first place team for the wild card. This is, the first team for the wild card. This is going to be where we're going to have, I think, some disparity of where
Yeah.
we are picking who we believe is in, who we believe is out. I'm taking the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm having them at number 5.
Oh,
I think they're going to be the top AFC wild card team. I think they're going to have that spot. I'm doubling down here. I am believing
you
in them.
you have the Jags. I have the
You
Vikings.
do.
That's our own
That
picks.
that is what we are held up on, and I'm totally believing in the Jags. I think at number 6, I do believe the Bengals sneak into the playoffs, even though I have documented my concerns with the team, and I do believe that is fair. And number 7, just because I think they're overly talented, and I think I don't see how I can keep them out of the playoffs. I'm putting the Dolphins in. I like what the stuff's there. I like what Chua has done this offseason. The interviews he's given, he seems more relaxed. He's been trashing Brian Flores out there. I believe in what
Yeah.
they are now. Come the cold weather season, the Dolphins are kind of going to be the Dolphins. They are the team by far that needs the number one overall seed because they need games to go through Miami. I just don't think they're going to be able to do it. But that is going to be a question mark, maybe something that you believe in coming into the seeds. So, Bri, your AFC seeds.
Yeah, so we start in agreement as the number one overall seed in the AFC, and it belongs to Kansas City
Okay.
Chiefs. Not a lot of drama there.
No.
Second, I'm going with the Ravens, number two. So I
Okay.
think you had them
I
three, I
did.
have them two, so we both have a very big year upcoming for Baltimore. I have Miami as my three seed.
Okay.
So you had them as a wild card. I have them the division winner in the three spot. And as mentioned when going through the South, Texans, like I think they're going to win the division, but not be quite as dominant as some may think. So I have them as my last division winner in the fourth spot.
Okay.
Then we get to the three wild cards. Let's see how many we have in common. We have one in common wild card wise.
Okay.
So my first wild card is going to be the second team out of the AFC East, which is the Buffalo
Okay.
Bills. Under Josh Allen, we know how talented he is, and even the loss of Diggs, I think this is still going to be a playoff team. This one might be a bit surprising, but I'm going Cleveland as my second
Okay.
wild card. I think the Browns find their way into the playoffs. I think it's always tough to play them in Cleveland in particular. I think they're going to surprise some people. Watson, maybe you get a little better play out of him. I'm a little higher on the Browns. And then my last, I'm sticking in that division, and I'm taking Joe Burrow and the
All
Bengals to
right.
get into the playoffs. It's hard to keep Joe Burrow and the Bengals out of the playoffs. If you're telling me he's healthy, even with the issues that we documented, Burrow's too good. They've got too much on the offensive side of the ball to be held down too much. I like Cincinnati to get there as my last team in.
Now, Bri, elephant in the room. I got to put your feet to the fire. No New York Jets in those playoffs. You got anything to say about that?
Well, look, I think we covered it with the division. I'm not feeling it enough. I just think there's many question marks, and I can't honestly say that I believe the Jets are going to be a playoff team this year.
Well,
So,
I think you're being fair, but we'll see how that plays out for some of our viewers. All right, Bri, going to the NFC, who we are going to have leading as the seeds. For me, I think the number one seed here for me, I'm not going to mince words about it. It's the Detroit Lions. I think they have stepped up to the plate. They are ready for the spotlight. They have the most consistent team with the least kind of off season kind of concerns, off the field concerns that we've talked about with some of these other teams. I think they'll be number one. And number two, it will be the 49ers. They still have some issues, but they're going to be a really good team. We know how physical they are. We understand under Kyle Shanahan. They're going to be the number two overall seed, I believe. And then I think I'm going to go the Philadelphia Eagles at 3. And I am going to go, as I said, ladies and gentlemen, we are doing this on the fly, the Falcons at 4. I think that's just going to work out where I think the Eagles will just be slightly better than what the Falcons are. I really like a lot of the offensive pieces that they have there, despite some of the coaching issues that maybe go on. I understand that's a big part of it. Now we get into the wild card teams of who's going to be there. Now this might shock some people. We'll see what happens here. I am a believer of the Packers. I think they will be the first team in the wild card. I like Jordan Love. I'm buying it. I'm buying their offensive weaponry. I'm taking them at 5. At number 6, I'm doing it, Brian. I am taking the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are going to be in the playoffs. I am drinking the Kool-Aid. I am buying what they got going there, and I think they're going to get in at number 6. And then at number 7, I believe the Los Angeles Rams will make the playoffs. 9 and 8, 10 and 7. They'll be somewhere in there, but they have a really tough schedule against the Bears, the Packers, the Niners, the Lions in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. I think potentially They can lose 3 of those games. That is going to hurt them come down the stretch. And then, barring obviously records and conference and head to head, they're going to drop all the way to the 7th seed. So I got Lions, Niners, Eagles, Falcons, Packers, Bears, Rams.
So we have one wild card in common. It happens to be your football team.
All right.
We each had the same division winners. We have two of them flip-flop though as far as the seed. So I'm gonna have the Niners give them the edge as the number one
Okay.
seed in the NFC, and I'm gonna put Detroit in the second
Okay.
spot. So of course that's the NFC title game from last year where I thought long and hard, but it feels like it's hard to pick against the same last four teams as
It's
last
hard.
year. It
Yeah.
just it is. So I might, no spoilers yet. I might have one change, but the bottom line is I feel like what we saw last year is kind of going to be the same thing. I wish, there could be some surprises, but
Right.
I don't see it that way. Philly is going to be my third seed out of the NFC, and I rounded out as you do with Atlanta. So then we get to the wild cards. Remember, my first wild card was your last one in, and it's the Rams. I think they're going to be a playoff team once again. Then the next two are going to be surprises, I would
I'm ready.
say. Now, while you have your Jags, I have the Vikings, but I don't have the Vikings in the playoffs.
Gotcha.
Instead, I have Seattle
All
as my
right.
second wild card. I think they return to the playoffs this year as a bit of a surprise team, and then kind of the one that's probably the shocker. I had them second place in the NFC East. Give me the Washington Commanders and Jaden
Wow.
Daniels make the playoffs as the last wild card.
How
So I'm
about
not as
that?
big on the Bears and Packers. Give me Washington as the surprise pick as the last one in NFC
So
wise.
you had the Falcons at 4, and then you had it who at 3?
Three was Philly.
Okay, so we'll put that in there. Eagles. So we both have them at 3. We both have the Falcons at 4. All right, Brian. That is all right. Now, for the audience and just generally people that follow football, usually there's at least 3 to 4 teams, sometimes as many as 6 or 7 new teams in the playoffs year to year. So if this worked out for the AFC, let's see how many new playoff teams me and you would have. So let's see, the Jags would be a new playoff team, and the Bengals would be a new playoff team. So that's 2 just from the AFC for me. You would have, let's see, the Browns made it last year. So the Bengals, only you would have the Bengals as the new playoff team from
Yeah.
last year. So you have 1. And then in the NFC, my new playoff teams here would be the Falcons, of course, and the Bears. Those would be my two playoff teams. So that would make 4 total. So that's kind of the average. And then you have, let's see, the Seahawks and the Commanders. So you would have 3. So you're a little bit below the average, but we did have some new teams in there,
Yep.
which is important because if we want to be accurate, you can't have the same teams as last year. It never happens like that, ever. All right, bye. So that brings us to the wild card, my friend. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So, by nature of it, the Lions, of course, are the number 1 seed here in the NFC for me. They're going to have the bye. So, we'll have the 2 seed coming in here. And, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. We are doing this live. That's part of the fun. We're doing Niners versus Rams in a spicy super wild card weekend matchup. Give me the Niners as the edge. They always beat the Rams, except for the one NFC championship, which I'm still grateful for because it led to a Super Bowl, but we're going to be outmatched. I believe that is the Niners are going to be taking the edge there. At the next game we'll have is the 3-seeded Eagles will be playing the 6-seeded Bears. That could be a lot of fun, man, of these two teams here. I am going to take the Chicago Bears. I believe in what this team is. I
Wow.
think they can win a playoff game. We just saw it last season with a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud. Give me the Bears to knock off the Eagles. Huge changes in that case could potentially be coming in Philadelphia. And then at the number, of course, 4 and 5 seeds, you'll have the Falcons hosting a game against the number 5 seeded Packers. And I believe this is where the Packers will win it and the Falcons' kind of nice, fun season will come to an end. Bry, your NFC Super Wild Card Weekend. What you got?
Yeah. Yeah, so I have the Niners as the number one overall seed. They get the bye. So the first matchup is the two-seeded Lions take on Washington, and this is where the Washington parade ends. I have Detroit taking that one. I then would have the three-seeded Eagles taking on the six-seeded Seattle Seahawks, where I have Philly advancing. And then finally, I have your Rams who take on Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where maybe it's an upset, maybe not, but I'm taking the Rams to win a wild card round and beat the Falcons. So we both have Atlanta getting ousted after being the division winner.
That makes sense kind of for a fourth seeded NFC South team. That's usually the case come year to year. All right. I like that. And I hope that works out. As a Rams fan, I would love that matchup. I think that'd be really nice. All right. So we switch over to the AFC. Bri, by the AFC nature, the number one seed, we both have the Chiefs. Of course, both of us are going to have them on the bye. So I would have the two-seeded Texans going against. So let's do that here. Bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. The two-seeded Texans going against the seven-seeded Dolphins. I think even though they're inside a dome that does favor the Dolphins, that at least they're out of the cold weather, I still think the Texans are going to knock them off there, and they are going to win that game. Then you would have the three-seeded Ravens would play in a nice divisional matchup here. The six-seeded Bengals, I think this is where the season of the Bengals comes to an end, and the Ravens win that one. I think that'll be a lot of fun watching two AFC North teams there. We've seen them battle out in recent years in the playoffs. And then we'll have the Bills versus the Jags. This could be a fun game. Buffalo hosting the Jags. Now, I'm a believer in the Jags, but I do not think they're going to play well in cold weather. Give me the Bills at home in the Super Wild Card weekend. I think they will knock off the Jags.
All right, so Chiefs are the one seed. They get the bye. My first matchup has the second seeded Ravens hosting Cincinnati, a same matchup for you, but in different seed order. And I'm taking the Ravens in what should be an interesting game. I mean, like you said, those two teams played recently. The Ravens with a backup quarterback, remember, nearly stole that game.
Huntley, right?
So I think this time around, you bank on Lamar being healthy and the Ravens take down Cincinnati. That's the first matchup. Then I have Miami in the three spot taking on Cleveland. Interesting game. I have the Dolphins winning a playoff game for the first time
It
in
is in
quite a
Miami.
while. So give me Miami to light it up on their home turf there in the wild card round. And then finally, I have the Buffalo Bills taking on the Texans, where here maybe you consider it an upset. I have the Bills on the road going into Houston and
Right.
knocking out the Texans, who take a bit of a step back, a little too much hype on them. I think they're going to fall short of expectations. I like the Bills to advance.
All right. You are not believing in the Texans as much. You're not drinking the Kool-Aid this season. I respect it. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go, and I apologize that I'm leaning over here and writing. I want to keep it all authentic here. Get it all on record here. So, the divisional round for the NFC, by the nature of the picks, of course, that we just had, will be the number one seeded for me, Detroit Lions, visiting the lowest seed from last round, which let me take a look at that, would be the six-seeded Bears. I think the Niners will end Caleb Williams' fantastic rookie season, and that's where the Lions in a divisional matchup will knock them off there. Then you will have, of course, the two-seeded Niners fresh off their win over the Los Angeles Rams. They will play the next lowest seed, which will, of course, be the Green Bay Packers, which seems like these two teams constantly meet in the playoffs. I think the 49ers will win that one. And then we will have, let's see, we'll have that one, that one, that one. We will have, yeah, I think that's it. That's all I got. Cool. I'm all good.
All right, so NFC, I have the same matchup here that you had in the wild card round with your Rams taking on the Niners, and we're in agreement, the Niners with the edge, so I have them once again in the NFC title game. And then Philly and Detroit, it's these are the last two teams that made the NFC title game
Mm-hmm.
facing those same Niners. And here's where I'm just going to be a little different and believe in the Eagles. I
Okay.
think they get over the top this year and take down Detroit. So it sets up a San Francisco Philly NFC title
All
game for
right, I
me.
love it. All right, and swing over to the AFC divisional round. So by nature, obviously, we'll both have the Chiefs as the number one seed, playing our lowest seed that we had from the past round. So for me, it really stayed 1, 2, 3, 4 for me. They will be in another again rematch with the Buffalo Bills, and of course, the Chiefs are going to win
Yes.
that game there in Arrowhead. That'll be a lot of fun. And then you will have another rematch of last season. You will have the two-seeded Texans hosting the three-seeded Ravens, and I believe it's going to be much the same again. Maybe, maybe not. I'm taking the Houston Texans. It's going to be a different thing against Baltimore, who of course beat the Texans last season. I think the Texans get the best of them, advance to the AFC Championship.
Wow. I'm going again. It just seems like the Chiefs and Bills can't avoid each other. They're
That's
just
how it
always
is.
there. So I too have Kansas City advancing and getting to yet another AFC title game. Then my other matchup is the Ravens and the Miami Dolphins, where I have Baltimore taking down Miami. That just never seems to be a good matchup for the
No.
Dolphins, especially going into Baltimore. So I have a Chiefs Ravens AFC title game, which of course a rematch of last season.
Yeah, I feel like for the ladies and gentlemen, like the fans watching out there, it can be a little boring in this. But listen, these are the top teams are the top teams. I feel like we have a couple good top teams, and then there's really a lot of great teams, and then there's a couple bottom feeders. So we have I have four new playoff teams. You have three new playoff teams. But I think when the rubber meets the road here, and all these teams start playing each other, this is how I see it working out against the competition, kind of very similar to last year. So Brian, it brings us to the championship game. Here we are. Championship Sunday, always a really fun one. We will have, for me, I will start off first. I got the number one seeded Detroit Lions in a rematch here. Let's see. Yes. No, I have the Eagles. Okay. They're in the. No, excuse me. I'm sorry. I have the 49ers here. There we go. That's what happens when you do it on the fly, ladies and gentlemen. I have the 49ers here in a rematch against the Detroit Lions. Yes, I am correct. Okay. There we go. And this one I kind of have gone back and forth on of like, do the Lions get over the hump? Is this their year to get to the Super Bowl? I don't think it is. I think the 49ers are getting back again. I just think there's something about Dan Campbell's approach, the way he coaches games down the stretch. I can't fully believe it. And we've seen them collapse last season. We know the Niners, they got a steady hand. They're calm, cool, and collected. And maybe they have Williams back at that point. The Ayuk situation is kind of calmed down. They have the most talented team. I believe they're going to knock off the Detroit Lions. And yeah, I'll let you go for the NFC before we do AFC.
So my title game is the Niners and the Philadelphia Eagles, where I once again have the 49ers getting
Yeah,
to the Super Bowl. So we are in agreement on the NFC representative in the next Super Bowl. For the Niners, it's just about finishing the job at this point. They've proven they can get there. They
it is.
gotta win it. And I think they're gonna get there again. Whether they win it, well, stay tuned.
Yeah, it's tough when you're doing these, right? Because like you want to be unique, you want to have the trendy pick, you want to do all this fun stuff, but at the end of the day, you have to be honest with yourself. And if you think these teams are going to win, it's what you got to call. All right, Brian, that brings us to the AFC Championship. I have the number one seeded Kansas City Chiefs going against the number two seeded Texans. And unfortunately, the Texans are going to come to an end. I have to stop not believing in the Kansas City Chiefs when it comes down to it. This team is a juggernaut. They have by far the best quarterback in the league. I think they actually got better this offseason. Their defense is still great. Give me them as the Kansas City Chiefs winning, and it's going to be another rematch of last year's Super Bowl. But let's be honest, we saw it in 2019. We saw it last year. It's not that crazy to see it again.
No, it's not. And like we said before, like it just feels like it's gonna be hard to not have the same 4 or 5 teams in the championship rounds. So I have the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Baltimore Ravens in what is my top 2 seeds in the AFC. But here's my surprise. The Chiefs are out and the Ravens
Wow.
are in the Super Bowl.
So
So my
they get
rematch
over the
gets you
hump, huh?
back and they get over the hump. So I got Ravens 49ers for the first time since the Harbaugh Bowl, and hopefully this time the lights don't go out.
That changed honestly the entire complexion of that game. You never know what may happen. All right, Bri. The Super Bowl is upon us in this case. I have a rematch of the Kansas City Chiefs going against the 49ers. Who's going to win? 2 number 1 seeds. Are the Chiefs going to three-peat? Is this the year that NFL history is made here?
Can I take a guess at where you're going?
Go for it.
My guess is you're taking AC.
All right, you think so? I am taking the San Francisco 49ers. I believe that they are going to win
Oh,
it. I believe they have been knocking at the door. And let's be real, this may be the last season they have a shot. They have the most expensive team really in the league. They pay premium at defensive end, running back, wide receiver. Brock Purdy is coming down the tracks. You might not have this chance again. And I believe the Chiefs could easily, it's a coin flip game, could easily see them winning it. But a three-peat, you know how hard that is? You know how much pressure that is to do something that's never been done before? I think the Niners get the best of them this time, and they win the Super Bowl, as much as that hurts my soul.
you surprised me there. I mean, look, I think it's a good pick, definitely. I just thought you were going to go the other way there.
Gotta
And
shake it
as
up.
for me, who has the Niners taking on the Baltimore Ravens in my Super Bowl, and I am going with your 2024 Super Bowl champion Baltimore
I have a feeling.
Ravens.
I have a
I
feeling.
they are going to do it this year. We mentioned Henry, the addition to that offense, I think is going to prove to be big. Lamar gets over all the criticisms of the playoffs with a big run finally. And the Niners, they keep knocking, but it's hard when you keep getting there and you keep falling short to break that door open. I think it's going to sting them again where they get there and they fall short, and which should be a great game. I think this would be a tremendous matchup. It was a great Super Bowl the last time around, and I think Lamar and company take it home. Ravens, Super Bowl
I mean,
champs.
if our stuff comes out here, huge storylines. The Chiefs, for me, don't get the three-peat. The Niners finally get over the hump. What does that mean for paying everyone? Is this kind of a last hurrah for the team? For you, you have Lamar Jackson. After all the playoff kind of issues he's had and all the people talking rightfully so about his performances, gets over the hump, beats the incumbent 3-time champions, potentially the 2-time in a row champions in the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, and then beats the Niners. That would be a hell of a story. And the Niners falling short again would be a crusher that could potentially break up some of the big pieces of that team. Wow. That was fun, Bri. I love doing this prediction show. Hopefully, we've been here a long time. This is going to be a big podcast that you're watching. There, of course, will be timestamps below. But, Bri, anything that you're regretting or immediately regretting after you've given all these decisions?
Yeah, it's a good question because, part of the fun of doing predictions is like midway through the season going back and looking and seeing
Yeah.
just how wrong you were. And we took some risks, which I think you have to do. You
Yeah.
don't want to just go with all chalk. I mean, look, the Washington pick for me, I'm
Big
taking
stuff.
a risk. I'm believing in Jaden Daniels and that Washington can surprise some people and teams like the Cowboys to
We
disappoint and the
both
Texans to
both
disappoint
had them
on
out of the
different levels.
playoffs. That's a big deal. Both of us had the Cowboys not making the playoffs.
No Cowboys, no Jets, which is two that I think most pundits would have
Yeah.
in the. Well, I don't know where most people stand on the Jets. I think a lot of people think there's questions with the Jets,
Yeah.
but we'll see.
And you had the Commanders as your big pick. I took the shot with the Bears. I think they're going to make some huge strides here. So I feel like that's a pick too. That's a little out on the limb.
You had them winning one round or two rounds.
One
It
round.
definitely won.
I believe that
Okay.
they are going. They're going to win their wild card game against the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think the Lions the next week are going to knock them off in Detroit.
All right. So next stop is week one in football for real.
I can't wait, Bri. This is a ton of fun. Thank you so much for joining me as always. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, once again, if you've made it this far, we greatly appreciate you. There are timestamps below as you're watching this video, in the video cuts that you're watching. So, of course, you could skip around because I understand we're probably here for, I don't know, like an hour and 40 minutes. So I understand if you don't want to watch this entire podcast. But this one is always big. We're going to be back again. If you miss us, you're not going to have to miss us for too long because we're going to do a week one prediction show. We're going to talk about all the games week one before the season actually starts. So you're going to get a double dose of us even before you watch an NFL game. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun, Bri. I can't wait for us to get into that. And then we'll be back consistently, and we did pretty good last year. We're going to do even better this year every week, talking about the games, the results, our predictions. We're going to have a whole bunch of fun stuff in store this season. Hopefully visually and audio-wise it'll be better for you at home. I'm so excited that First and 10's back, man. I can't wait. Thanks for joining me, Bri. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Look forward to another terrific season, and we'll see how our teams fare.
For sure, I'm excited. Going to be a lot of storylines. Of course, our Twitter links and all that stuff down below. We would appreciate the follow, and hopefully we'll do well fantasy-wise as drafts are coming up. So good luck to everyone out there that is going to be doing that has not drafted already. And I'll say the usual. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you'd be so kind. And until next episode of First and 10, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching.